What will happen when the Queen dies, and will Prince Charles become King Charles III? On June 2, 1953, Queen Elizabeth II celebrated her coronation as she was officially crowned sovereign. Today marks 65 years since the Queen's coronation, with her having sat on the throne for 66 years. But what will happen when the Queen dies, and will Charles becomes King Charles III? Other name: Operation London Bridge. Firstly, when the Queen's death is confirmed, a code word will be used to inform the Prime Minister of the news. According to The Guardian, the leader of the time will be woken from their sleep if necessary and told by civil servants that London Bridge is down. The Prime Minister will know this means Queen Elizabeth II has passed away, and that a series of events will follow in what has been called Operation London Bridge. Notifying foreign governments will form a key part of the first tasks and will be handled by the Foreign Office, who will tell 15 governments outside the UK. The message will then be passed to the 36 other nations in the Commonwealth for who the Queen is still a figurehead. The news spreads. The media will then inform the general public of the news to commence a period of mourning. It is highly likely in the age of social media that many may find out through platforms such as Facebook and Twitter. A news flash will be posted by the Press Association to inform the world's media simultaneously. Meanwhile, blue lights will begin flashing at commercial radio stations, which will alert the DJ to switch to the news and play inoffensive music in the meantime. Newscasters on TV screens will also wear black attire, with news likely to dominate most channels for weeks. Mourning. Britain would enter a period of mourning for at least 12 days following the death of Queen Elizabeth II. The magnitude of her death would be enormous. It would alter everything from our finance industry to our television schedule. The death of a reigning monarch plays havoc with the economy and will also impact the stock markets and the country's banks. How it's announced. The way the Queen's death is announced will depend on how she dies. If, for instance, her passing is expected due to a long illness or similar, there will already be a plan in place should she succumb. Because it's funded by license payers, all BBC channels will show the BBC One broadcast announcing her death. Other channels are not required to interrupt regular scheduling, though it's almost certain they will. Although if it is sudden, or in a public place like Princess Diana, the palace will have little control over the news spreading. After the initial announcement that the Queen has died, the BBC will cancel scheduled comedy shows until after her funeral. Prince Charles' accession. As first in line to the throne, when his mother dies, Prince Charles will become King Charles III instantly, given that the country has already had King Charles I, 1625–1649, and King Charles II, 1660–1685. Elizabeth became Queen Elizabeth II immediately following her father King George VI's death. The reason for this is that a throne is never vacant. Sovereignty passes on accession rather than coronation. It is expected that the Accession Council will then meet at St. James's Palace to declare him as king, which is just a formality. Likewise, his coronation ceremony will be arranged, but it is likely to be far sooner than Elizabeth's was. Apparently, there's a committee that has been planning Prince Charles' coronation in secret for more than a decade, and its name has been let slip in government documents. The committee is code-named Golden Orb, according to papers seen by the Mail on Sunday, and is made up of members of the aristocracy and not linked to government in any way. Headed by the Duke of Norfolk, the panel is said to be in charge of all state ceremonial events that involve the monarchy. Although it is planning affairs related to the royal family, apparently it operates independently of Buckingham Palace and Clarence House. Its other responsibilities are reported to include planning the Queen and Prince Philip's funerals, code-named London Bridge and Forth Bridge respectively. Royal historian Dr. Anna Whitelock told the Mail on Sunday the name is inspired by part of the crown jewels used in the coronation. She said the orb is a hollow ball of gold and a Christian symbol of authority signifying Christ's dominion over the world represented in the next monarch's power. The name of the committee reminds us that at the heart of the ceremony, the king is made to swear vows of awesome severity, not to his country, or even his subjects, but to God. The precise details of the Charles coronation aren't known, but reports suggest it will be less grand than Elizabeth II's. The words to the national anthem and new postage stamps and currency will be minted and printed to reflect Prince Charles' ascension to the throne. MPs would be expected to pledge their allegiance to the new monarch, although there is a tradition among Republican MPs to cross their fingers while taking the oath. Prince William would become the Prince of Wales once his father took the crown, giving Kate the title of Princess of Wales, once held by Diana. A king of a different name. When Prince Charles becomes king, he might not actually be known as King Charles. Instead, he could take on another name altogether, as is the prerogative of reigning monarchs. If he were to keep his first name of Charles to reign as king, he would be known as King Charles III. However, with his full name being Charles Philip Arthur George, there are a number of other names he could select, if he so wished. One reason some historians believe he could give up the title of Charles is due to the name's association with previous monarchs. Charles I was the only member of the monarchy to be tried and executed for treason. His son, Charles II, was known for his raucous romantic life. For this reason, speculation has grown that he could choose his third middle name, George, to reign as King George III. Not only would this be him giving his own middle name precedence, it would also serve as a nod to his grandfather, King George VI, who was Queen Elizabeth's beloved father. Of course, he could also choose to rule as King Philip I or King Arthur I. A spokesman for Clarence House has previously advised that Charles' name will only be decided at the time he takes the throne. It's likely Charles will stick by his first name, however, if only to offer a sense of stability to the British public. When he takes to the throne, the public will be saying goodbye to a monarch who has ruled for at least 7 decades. Stability is believed to be the very reason King George VI chose to rule with his middle name George rather than his first name of Albert. Following the abdication of his brother, Edward VIII in 1936, he resorted to his father King George V's name to offer a sense of continuity and therefore security to his public. The funeral. Before being buried, the Queen's body will lie in state and public viewing in Westminster Hall, open for 23 hours a day until the funeral. When the coffin arrives, there will be a short ceremony, before people will be able to pay their respects. The number of mourners expected to queue up to see the Queen is immeasurable. More than 200,000 members of the public paid their respects to the Queen Mother when she died in 2002. After Princess Diana's death in 1997, tens of thousands of mourners laid bouquets of flowers outside the palace. The funeral itself is expected to take place 12 days after the Queen's death and will be broadcast on television and streamed online. The state funeral will begin by her coffin being taken to Westminster Abbey by gun carriage, where it will be led by Archbishop of Canterbury, Justin Welby. Leaders and heads of state from across the world will attend, and it's likely that members of the public will line the route of the funeral cortege. Following the funeral, the Queen's body could be laid to rest in a number of places. Many speculate she could be buried at her properties in either Balmoral or Sandringham, while other reports suggest she would be buried in a plot next to her father King George VI at the St. George's Chapel in Windsor. Bigger impacts. The chain reaction of the Queen's death will be considerably greater than a new king and a period of mourning. With the death of the long-serving head of state, some of the 53 countries may choose to sever ties and become a republic. Her death could also cause a rise of republicanism here in Britain. While there is still strong support for the royal family, many see it as an outdated tradition. Depending on Charles' rule, people may call for the monarchy to be abolished altogether. There is also speculation that Charles may step down and pass on the title to his eldest son, Prince William.